What's up, Radiant Soul? It's been a little while since I jumped into the world of Godherja, but with this massive update 0.3.1 Shades of Discontent on the horizon, I've been lucky enough to get permission from the developers to give you a little preview before its release. And while there's no way I could touch on everything because, and I mean this seriously guys, this is a huge update, I will do my best to touch on some of the major things featured in the changelog that you'll see, and also just some things that excite me. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. So to start off with probably the biggest and most obvious change, that's the map. Now on the screen right here, you can probably see that I have the old map up just for comparison, and I'm just going to show you the new map right now. So yeah, the map has been completely redrawn. A lot of the islands here are absolutely different. From what I understand, it was basically from the ground up a remaking of a good portion of the map, a lot of the locations, and just generally redrawing counties, redrawing kingdoms, redrawing a lot of stuff just to make the game not only run better, but I mean, it looks incredible. If we zoom in here, I mean, you can see the Order of the Forgotten Saint down here. Let me get rid of this. They have this beautiful new island. The Shattered Coast here looks tremendous. If you go down here to Aranoi, you can see that it has changed a lot. There's a very interesting hole here down where the Redlands used to be. The Redlands have completely been revamped. We'll talk about that shortly. The Otics have gotten a lot of updates. There's a lot of new things that I want to talk about. I'm not going to make this super cinematic because there's just too much to talk about, but at moments where I can throw in a little cinema, as I know you guys like, we'll do that. So I'm going to start off here with the Aonist, because as you know, that was one of the first lore videos I ever made. And we're going to start off with something new here called the Patron Saints. Now there is something now known as Saint levels to these Patron Saints. Now this is a new feature to the Aonist religion. Basically, it explains a little bit about who their patron saint was. There seems to be different levels of devotion, and as you can actually see, I don't even know if you'd call it devotion or just the order achieving its goals, but as you can see, things like Philantros, this is not going well for them. But if you look at Eos, his is actually really high, and it appears that you get certain bonuses. Yeah, you get something known as a Saint Affinity, and you get the Exemplar of Eos, which gives you various buffs. This one would give you Paragon of Eos. This one would give you Incarnation of Eos. Now these are essentially just character buffs that you achieve by doing things that are according to what your patron saint would have done. Winning duels will increase your affinity score. Raiding pro-slavery faiths increases your affinity because Callisto was anti-slavery. Basically, these are ways for these orders to essentially go back to what they were doing in the first place. If you've watched my lore, or if you've read into the lore of a lot of these Aonist orders, now you know that most of them don't live as their founders did. They've essentially been co-opted by people who have basically twisted their ideals and created this new kind of disgusting reality. The Aosians are the ones that are closest related to their former selves, hence why they have such a high rate here. But it's a cool new feature that I actually quite like, because it allows for maybe you to roleplay as an order that is trying to amend the errors of the past. So as for example, levels of fame decreases affinity, levels of devotion increases affinity. So you'd have to do religious things here. This one is being generous, it'll increase divinity. As you can see, they're being the opposite of generous, so they're getting nothing. But you'll get lower domain taxes, which is actually interesting. So you'll have to really decide on if this is something that you want to do. Minus 5% domain taxes, that is interesting. But that's like a major addition to the Aonists in this update. Something I want to point out about this school though for the Aonists, and this is brilliant. So I didn't realize this at first. I was actually told this after the fact, so I'm adding this in post. But the Aosians, like I said, they're more related, or they're the closest related to their original conception. I decided to come over here to the Thesians. And if you go to the patron saint of one of the other orders, basically they're going to have the evil version, or what the order practices now, of their saints. So they'll get like medical experiments increases affinity, executing increases affinity for Catharitos, winning duels. Although Eos is actually still the same. Slaughtering enemy troops in battle as a commander for Sancia. Ruling with dread. Raiding increases affinity, showing off your wealth increases your affinity. As you remember, I talked about how donating money to charity increases your affinity. It's very interesting that they have this contrast. I almost wonder if there's going to be a decision where the Aosians are going to be able to do something in the future to where these will get fixed. I'm not sure. It seems to be pointing in that direction. So coming over here to the Olentics, we actually have a few new decisions. One of the big ones is to rebuild Otiched's empire. Now, if you don't know who Otiched is, he's basically the Genghis Khan of the Olentics. He existed quite a while ago. I can't recall off the top of my head, but basically this would allow you to become like a second Otiched or a second Otichedian empire, and it gives you some various other decisions once you hit that point that allows you to basically call yourself new things. They've also expanded their mask system so that they now have mask artifacts, as far as I understand. And then there's a couple new decisions, new features for the Olentics to sort of expand their flavor, because they are really cool lore-wise. They just didn't have a lot going on. But now they're working to amend that. They've been working to amend Aranoi in general, because if you remember, Aranoi was huge and taking it over was really difficult. So if you look now, it is not nearly as enormous, and you only have to control 80% of the de jure counties to make it, whereas before you had to control 100. That is a nice change in my opinion, as somebody who tried to make a series there and it went very, very bad. I'm jumping around a lot because I'm going off of notes that I have, but something I want to draw your attention to is this new playable area up here called Lonely Light. Now, Lonely Light follows a unique new religion known as Aegis Pact, which the Aegis Pact was the legendary vow made by the 12 refugee kings and queens of the mainland and the 31 tribal chieftains of Lonely Light that ended the bloody feuds, the period of mass bloodshed as refugees poured into the west to flee the sorrowing, which happened over here, and attempted to establish dominion over the local tribes and the other fleeing mainlanders. These are people in general who essentially fled from this land, former occupants of this land who now live here. They have their own unique culture, as you can see, which if you want to read that. Hailing from the southern coast of the Lonely Light, the Scafig Lighters are a tough and hardy people. Most Scafig Lighters on the Isle make their living on farming leeks and trolling on the misty waters of the coast. There is a dock in front of every village where women and children spend the day weaving giant nets or spearing any spined eels that get too close. To protect the village, each dock has a sea dragon that is painted down its entire length, along with dozens of lanterns attached to the sides to guide the fishermen home. Very cool. The many vessels on the coastline have led to several early detections of lich fleets, leading to the invasion ending before it even sees the coast. Historically, the Scafig Lighters have avoided the traps of glory and power, and as such regard the Aegis as a necessary evil to keep at arm's length. However, their scouting skills on the water and their reliability during a crisis have led to the Scafig Lighters being declared the Aegis Keep as many scales mount. I can't read these words very well, and I apologize. But as you can see, I actually jumped around there. But the Aegis Pact has water worship, they have ancestor worship, and they have esotericism. I believe there's more than one culture over here as well. So there's these guys, there's these ones, and then there's also the East Lighter. So 3 new cultures, a new faith system, basically a new area to play. A new feature too over here, which is included in some of the other ones. Chevalier also gets this, but these East Lighters, or these Lonely Lighters, are allowed to attack the Lichdoms. This was sort of like a weirdly dubious previous thing that you could do. But now the Lichdoms are actually like threats, real things that can actually attack you. From what I understand, they can actually invade. They have the Necropolis now, which is really cool. But from what I understand, I think these have to get a special decision for the Chevalians to do it. I think the other reason he can attack is because he has a Casus Belli. So if you were to get a Casus Belli and basically want to get rid of the Liches, from what I understand, you're able to do that now. And while it would be easy for me to continue to go about like that, like piecemeal, where I'm just like, and this has this and this has that, there's new magic systems, there's new decisions, there's new artifacts, there's so much new stuff in a bunch of different regions, new starting characters, like characters who have starting events. It would be virtually impossible for me to cover all of them in a reasonable fashion. And so instead I'm going to cover probably the 2, at least the most interesting to me, things that have been added here. And one of that is right in front of me. So rather than read off a list of some of the features in the Redlands down here, because there's so much, I'm just going to show you. So if we jump in here, as you can see, the characters, most of them are several hundred years old, and they have a lot of new features. One of them being this Black Spawn trait. Now this is an example of basically their devotion to their gods, which assumedly dwell in this weird pit here. And basically, the more objectives or missions you do for these gods, the higher this stat can be. And it gives you various boosts. As you can see, it gives you increased Arcana, increased Dark. It also means they can't have children, but I believe they're allowed to adopt children, or they're allowed to just select an heir, from what I remember. They have insane magical prowess because they've been alive for so long. Most of them have incredibly high magic levels. The idea down here is that you would play like a tall run. You're not really supposed to be building duchies or creating anything. You're supposed to just be like strong and kind of sort of work together to eradicate everything. That's kind of their overall goal, is to sort of sweep the world with a miasma of doom, which is pretty bad. They have a new magical school, the Absolution of the Void. I just did not mean to click that. As you can see, their powers derive through pacts with their dark gods. Terrifying and esoteric in their cruelty, disciples of the Void seek to indulge in their god's hunger and answer for calls for sacrifice. And as you can see, this guy's got a few new spells. There's, I can't remember how many new spells there are. I believe it might just be this 7. but some pretty cool ones. They have unique men-at-arms now, which they use piety or fervor, I believe it's going to be changed to be called, to summon like these chasm terrors, which as you can see are just absolutely ridiculously strong. We got void hosts, which are even more ridiculously strong. We have Redland cultists, ridiculously strong. Basically all of these are insane, and the way you grant fervor, or the way you get piety, is by doing things towards your faith. So if we jump into the Redlander cults, they are mysterious as they are esoteric, shadowy, and insular. The number of times they have been interacted with the world as a group can be counted on one hand. Redland cultists worship dark and unknowable gods. The sound of their names is said to be enough to drive foreigners to madness. And if we click on that, they have literalism, reincarnation, and something called Call of the Void. The Dark One's call, the sweet whisper of oblivion, will give us power and glory in their dread work. Only upon the devouring of the weak flesh of this world shall we ascend to empty divinity. Now, as you can see, you have the option here to raise all raiders. Now, they have incredibly strong men-at-arms, so you're going to be raiding like nobody's business. Can capture slaves on raids or in a war for use in labor and sacrifice. This will increase your devotion. If I'm not mistaken, raising raiders will also mean that you shouldn't get this unraised men-at-arms penalty. Let's actually just find that out real fast. Okay, so the raised army actually gives it -7.9. So essentially, your goal is to try and do things for the gods as much as possible, increase this level of your black spawn trait. I'm not actually sure that's in this update, but I'm pretty sure it is. And as you can see, he's got crazy magical prowess. He has an insane lifespan, and it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. Okay, so I've let this go off for a couple minutes because I wanted to show you one of the examples. I've begun to hear the calls of the dark beyond, just as I had awaited. At first, I only caught mere glimpses of the void's unspoiled beauty in my dreams, but now the gods' whispers start to reveal the dark truths I have desired for so long in the back of my mind. My masters command me to slay a virtuous essence. It is not my place to question their decrees, only to obey. It will not be easy, but only those who feed the darkness without will truly understand the one within. The masters will be done. It wants me to kill a character. It looks like it wants me to kill 4 characters. But yeah, that's just an example of one of the quests that you could get. There's a couple other decisions too, from what I understand. You could get like a Seek a Disciple from the pit. From whence we come to where we all return. The pit is the beginning and the end of all things. The crest of the true gods beyond Eris. And the place where flesh and ichor are joined into black blood. It is from there that I shall call forth an initiate worthy to be my disciple. And essentially your heir. You get an initiate of the dark spawn, or the black spawn, I'm sorry, and they pretty much become your heir that you're sort of going to be like molding into your evil image just in case you die, because some of them don't live forever. Some of them, as you can see, they're like 300, some of them are like 200. You could presumably live forever if you do those missions that I showed you, but you know, not everybody can do that. There's also these Redrunners who are basically like the legions or the various other peoples who are stuck here in the Redlands while these guys are doing some crazy stuff. You can either choose to fight them, although that would probably be a really bad idea, or you can try and do a little bit of a migration, which is probably what I would suggest. Maybe move yourself like down over here. You know, you're just like, I'm gonna declare war on that guy, and I'm just gonna invade him, and then I'm gonna get rid of all that because I don't want to deal with any of what's going on over here. And that'd be totally reasonable. Be totally respectable. I wouldn't judge you. The Redrunners are, since the Redrunner is a new thing, I'm going to read it to you. In the southeastern corner of Aranoy, the land fades from its normal hues into a deep red. Canyons snake through the region, and the Magi report negative effects emanating from it. Despite this, the children of Adversary have still settled this land, or at least pieces of it. Along the coast, a series of wall-enclaved hosts, people known as the Redrunners, who earn their name due to the important role in trade connecting the mysterious lands to the west of Adversaria. The Redrunners are perhaps one of the most alien Adversarian cultures and often perceived as such by their counterparts across the Empire. Okay, so they've been here, never mind. Their inability to colonize the inland has left them a series of isolated fortresses and interestingly created one of the most socially mobile populations in the Empire. As their economy is almost entirely based around trade, those with the ability to claw their way to the top are able to regularly break with social conventions. The Redlanders also carry a series of superstitions, fearing the cane from which it is said that none can return. Which, I mean, yeah, that's understandable. And as you guys know, one of my favorite regions in the game is Chivali. I've touched on it a little bit with the Liches. As I said, you could do battle with them in the north and sort of fleshes out that region a little bit, but also adds something known as the Rivarisians. Now, these are the natives of the Riverlands, or the Mummer's Vale. This is down here near the Connick Menor coast. So this has been known as the Mummer's Vale since the War of the Heretical Princes, which is a reference to the Mummer Knights, who fought valiantly against the Conclave of Raucor, who wished to take them over. Although their ancient origins are a little unclear, they're assumed to be Gallicator or Shurigard, which are sort of the proto-peoples in this region. Though they're geographically actually pretty close to the Conclave of Raucor, the hostile terrain of this region allowed them to maintain much of their cultural and religious identity. And farther in the swamps, there are said to be witches. This, however, has led many outsiders to view Rivarisians as uneducated, lesser, and pagans in comparison to the wider Chevalian peoples. There has never been a Chevali High King from the Vale, and their high nobility is often looked down upon as the lowest rung in the Chevali hierarchy. This despite the fact the Vale has been home to a host of way saints and legendary knights, to include Aindar, the Wing Knight, one of the famous companions of the champion of Chevali. But in short, the Rivarisians have long been oppressed and downtrodden, but despite that, have maintained a strong cultural identity and a proud heritage. Today, thanks to the acts of charity and rebuilding by the old High King Godfrey, the people of the Vale have slowly begun to rebuild and reclaim their old pride, with some even calling for justice for past wrongs. The question on both peasant and nobility's mind now is, will someone rise and carve a place for the Vale in this fractured Chevali, and perhaps even claim the crown of the High Kingdom itself with the same might and glorious spirit as the mummers of old? Or will the Rivarisians be forever relegated to second-class citizens, looked down on by their neighbor and rival for years to come? So that's all I really wanted to touch on, guys. From what I understand, the Redlands is probably the biggest addition to this update, as well as the map, obviously. From what I've seen so far, it runs really smooth. There's been some visual changes, some overhauls, new regions, obviously. There's plenty more planned, of course, but I mean, there's a lot to be excited about already that's already here. There's a lot of new stuff in this region, plus a whole new place to play with new cultures and faiths, and being able to fight against the liches. It's a very exciting time to be a Godherja fan, and I cannot wait till you get the chance to jump in here and enjoy it. But that is going to be it for me. This has just been a little preview of this upcoming update, and I hope you enjoyed it. But as always, I'm Soul, and I'll happily see you in the next one.